Hey guys, it's Devin with Admiral Off-Road, and today we're talking about control arms. Now, before we get into changing your control arms, I just want to go over really quickly what are control arms and why are they on your vehicle. Now, my videos are normally specific to a Jeep Cherokee, but these principles apply to any vehicle that has a solid front axle and has coil springs up front. Now, here's the body of the vehicle, and here's our axle down here. The upper control arm I drew in red, and the lower control arm I drew in green. Now, the control arms connect the body of the vehicle to the axle. If you didn't have these control arms here, your axle would be free to move around underneath the vehicle and you wouldn't be able to drive it. Now, you have 4 control arms. You have an upper control arm and a lower control arm on each side. So here you see the driver's side of the vehicle. I have an upper control arm and a lower control arm. If you were to look at the other side, it's the same thing. Upper control arm and a lower control arm. Now, if you saw in my last video, I mentioned that there's a certain amount of lift that you're going to get where your stock control arms just aren't going to cut it anymore. They're not going to give you the ride quality or the suspension travel that you're going to want. When we decide to move away from our stock control arms, we have 3 options. We can do short arms, long arms, or drop brackets. Now, starting with short arms, the big advantage is price. They're going to be your cheapest option, and the reason why that is you're keeping all of your stock components other than the control arms themselves. What I mean is you don't have to make any new control arm brackets. There's no fabrication involved. It's simply a matter of swapping your stock control arms for these new slightly longer ones. Now, the drawback to short arms is you're not going to get the same ride quality or suspension travel that you would with long arms. Now, they're going to be a lot better than your stock control arms were, but again, they're not going to be quite the same as long arms. When you have a shorter lift, it's not really an issue, but the higher you go, the more and more you're going to want to step away from the short arms and go to the long arms. Moving on to long arms. Biggest thing is ride quality and travel. You're not going to get a better ride quality or travel than going with long arms. It's going to be the best that you can possibly get, and the reason for that is control arm angle. We're going to discuss that in just a second, but just know that control arm angle is what really decides your ride quality as well as your suspension travel. Big drawback with long arms is cost. They're going to be your most expensive option, and there's a couple reasons for that. One are the control arms themselves are more expensive, they're longer, there's more material, they're going to be more expensive. Now, there's also fabrication involved now. We're not using our stock control arm brackets, we're moving our brackets back. So you're going to have to make new brackets, cut your old ones off. There's just a lot more involved with putting a long arm kit together than just swapping out your control arms. Last one is drop brackets. Now, drop brackets are going to be in between long arms and short arms in terms of performance. You're going to get a better ride quality than short arms, better suspension travel than short arms, but just not on the same level quite as those long arms. Other advantage is cost. They're cheaper than long arms. They're about the same price as short arms. Now, the drawback that a lot of people bring up with drop brackets are they hang low underneath the Jeep. When you lift your Jeep, the body of the Jeep gets farther away from the axle. Now, the way drop brackets work are they take your body side control arm mounts and they drop them down low. So that takes your control arm mount from on the bottom of the unibody rail and it moves them down lower. So now you have something hanging down below the body of the Jeep. So if you do a lot of rock crawling or you wheel where there's a lot of places where you can get hung up on stuff underneath the body of the Jeep, that is something to be aware of. To demonstrate the effect that lifting a vehicle has on the control arms, I've drawn a diagram. The blue line, or blue horizontal line, represents the body of the vehicle, and these 2 lines here represent our control arms. The green line represents our control arms at stock ride height, and our blue line represents the control arms when we've lifted our vehicle. So we're going to start with our stock ride height, and we measure our control arm angle by measuring the angle between the body of the vehicle and the control arm itself. So this small green line represents our stock control arm angle. You can see it's not very extreme, and that's why we have generally a good ride quality at stock height. When we lift our vehicle, the distance between the body of the vehicle and the axle increases. So we go from this distance between the body and the axle now to this distance between the body and the axle. So it's much greater. If we keep the same length control arms, when we do that, we get a much greater angle. So this is our new control arm angle when we've lifted the vehicle. As you can see, this angle is quite a bit greater than our stock control arm angle. The way that control arm angle affects ride quality is as you're driving down, wherever you're going, and you hit a bump, your body of the vehicle wants to stay in one spot, and the axle wants to move up underneath it to absorb that energy. When we have a very small control arm angle, most of that energy is transferred through the coil springs and the shocks. Now that's what they're designed to do. They're designed to absorb that energy and not transfer very much of it to the vehicle itself. when your control arm angle is more extreme, the steeper it is, the more energy is going to be transferred through the control arms themselves and not through the suspension. The suspension is designed to absorb that energy. Control arms are not. Control arms are solid, so every bump in the road you're going to feel when it's translated through the control arm straight to the body of the vehicle. So that's why when you're driving a lifted vehicle, if those control arms are really short, you're going to have a really bad ride quality, and you're going to feel every bump and crack in the road. When it comes to suspension travel, that also is affected by your control arm angle. Your upper and your lower control arms are a fixed length. That means they can't expand or contract when the suspension cycles. The problem with that is that they're both attached to different points on the vehicle and on the axle. So there's going to be a certain amount of travel they're going to have before they start binding. Now, the binding effect is what's going to limit your travel. So if you have shocks that are long enough, springs that are long enough, but your control arms aren't, that's going to be your limiting factor in suspension travel. Now, the way we can fix that is by getting longer control arms or by dropping our control arms down. So the first one we're going to talk about is short arms. To demonstrate how a short arm helps with your control arm angle at a lifted ride height, I've added this red line to our diagram. Our green line still represents our stock control arm at our stock ride height. Our blue line is still our stock control arm at our lifted ride height, but this red line now is our short arm at our lifted ride height. The short arm is going to be longer than your stock control arms, but it's considered a short arm because it attaches to the body at the same point as our stock control arms do. So we're using our stock control arm mount, and that's what makes it a short arm. The reason why this helps with our control arm angle is because it pushes our axle forwards. Now, you might think, why would we want to push our axle forwards? Well, when you lift a vehicle and you keep your stock control arms, what happens is the axle not only moves farther away from the vehicle, so there's this vertical distance, there's also a horizontal shift that occurs. So if you lift a vehicle, you keep your stock control arms, your front axle actually moves closer to the back of the vehicle. So if you look at it from the side, your wheel isn't going to be centered under your wheel well anymore. It's actually going to be moved closer to the back. When we add our longer control arm to that, what we're doing is we're moving our axle back forward, so it's going to be centered underneath our wheel well again, and that's going to decrease our control arm angle. Now, it's not quite as good as our stock control arm at our stock ride height, but it's a definite improvement, as you can see, over our stock control arm at our lifted ride heights. To demonstrate how long arms affect control arm angle, we've added this pink line. Now, our other lines are going to stay the same, so green line represents our stock control arms at stock ride height, blue is stock control arm at lifted ride height, and red was short arm at lifted ride height. This pink one now is our long arm at lifted ride height. The major difference between this one and these three are our control arm mounts. Now, these three all use that stock control arm mount, so whether you're using a short arm or a stock control arm, they're all going to mount to the body on the same, at the same point. Our long arm, we move the control arm mount from right here all the way back. So we're moving our control arm mount farther back on the vehicle, which gives us room for a longer control arm without moving our axle. As you can see, again, there's no horizontal shift when you lift your vehicle when you use a long arm kit. Now, the main advantage to this is as you lift your vehicle higher and higher, these angles get extreme really, really quickly. With the long arm, the longer your arm is, the less extreme they're going to be at every ride height. So when you lift your vehicle up higher and higher, this is where your long arm is going to shine. The way drop brackets work is they take your stock control arm mounting bracket and it moves it down below the vehicle. To demonstrate this, we've got our green line, which is our stock control arm at our stock ride height, our blue line, which is our stock control arm at our lifted ride height, and now this purple line. This is our stock control arm, lifted ride height with drop brackets. The drop brackets themselves are represented by our purple dotted line, and the amount of lift is still represented by our blue dotted line. If we can get these two, our purple and our blue dotted line, to be the same length, that's going to lead these two lines to be parallel. What that means is if I can get my control arm drop brackets to be the same length as the amount of lift that I want, my new control arm angle is going to be the same as my stock control arm angle. That means I'm going to retain that same ride quality as I had when I was stock, but now I'm lifted. The drawback, though, is going to be if I lift my vehicle 4 inches and I drop my control arm bracket 4 inches, I haven't gained any clearance there. So I've gained clearance everywhere else on the vehicle except right here where my control arm mounts to the body of the vehicle. Hey guys, thank you very much for watching my video. If you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. And if you like what you saw here, please like and subscribe for more videos.